This is a twisted tale of murder, greed, and unbelievable deception.
Harboring these types of secrets resulted in the most extreme, horrible things happening.
This is the biggest example of a fall from financial grace.
A true crime story with more shocking twists than a Hollywood thriller.
He's diabolical. He's a sociopath. He's a psychopath. He thinks only of himself.
It's hard to believe these secrets and lies would end in murder.
A business empire destined for greatness.
They made $12 million gross their first year. It goes from dream to nightmare.
It's fucked up.
You can't trust anyone, your family, your friends, or your business partners.
I had a gun in my office.
He just wanted to escape.
Greed is a bottomless pit and deadly sin.
He's on a round-the-world surf trip.
He's willing to destroy anyone in his path to earn as much money as possible.
He doesn't want to be found.
This is a spine-chilling tale of how far some people are willing to go to keep their secrets hidden and their deadly deeds in the dark.
One of the worst things I saw in 26 years as a prosecutor.
A secret to die for. Orange County in Southern California is the land of beautiful beaches, endless opportunities, and warm weather all year round. It's a place where dreams come true.
The coastal cities of Orange County are absolutely beautiful.
It is one of the most beautiful places in the entire world.
I grew up in this community surfing, boogie boarding, sandboarding, and going to school with kids that are driving Mercedes-Benz and Porsches.
You see people in the entertainment industry, right? Artists, and the people are generally not only just beautiful, but they're friendly.
Southern California offers a world of opportunity to those who work hard and dream big. 29-year-old Ed Shin and his wife Karen are living the dream.
They had 2 children and had established a really good life together.
They were very outgoing, entertained a lot, and both of them supported each other.
He went to UC San Diego, which is a difficult school to get into, even for excellent students.
Ed Shin is an impressive young guy. He worked for Merrill Lynch and some very well-known, very well-respected financial institutions.
He was somebody who clearly had a drive to succeed.
Ed is a young publisher. He runs a sports magazine out of Las Vegas. Community involvement and family time are important to Ed and Karen.
Ed Shin met his wife at a Bible study camp where they were both counselors.
A lot of their friends were involved in a community church. I think it gave them some type of foundation. People want something they can lean on to.
Some of the best business opportunities come when you least expect it, from a friend in the community.
I met Ed Shin through church. Ed seemed like he wanted to be a better father, a better husband, and even a better Christian.
Joseph Gray was the owner of Lead Generation Technologies.
In the advertising lead business is essentially these numbers that we see on TV, like, if you want to consolidate your debts, call this number, and people will respond to those advertisements, and then they'll act as a middleman with the professionals that are actually selling the service.
These were lucrative opportunities.
Joseph really took a liking to Ed. He was charming. He showed a lot of potential.
In Joseph, Ed finds a friend that understands the trials and tribulations of running a business.
The magazine Legends, it didn't always necessarily follow through the way Ed had imagined.
Sometimes he would allude to the commutes to Las Vegas, where he had a publishing company, and the challenges of running that. I think it was affecting his relationship with his wife.
Joseph liked him so much that he decided to throw him a lifeline.
I said, I'm starting something new, and I think you might be an asset and a fit for it, and invited him to consider joining our organization.
Joseph sees Ed as a kindred spirit, a perfect right hand to help propel the success of his business.
He was hired to be the vice president of business development for the company.
Joseph had a lot of faith in Ed. He basically gave him the keys to the kingdom.
He was raising someone from the ground up in his own business and showing him the way. So I think they became very close.
Joseph really went above and beyond to help him, not just in business, but with his family life as well.
Ed was trying to close on a house, and he was having issues being able to complete that transaction. So my wife and I ended up buying it for him.
There was a bond there. That's a pretty intimate thing to offer to buy somebody a house.
LG Technologies has many vendors, and one of them is the marketing company Lead Point, which is represented by a fun-loving 30-year-old man named Chris Smith.
Chris Smith was the quintessential California surfer. He wanted to be a professional wakeboarder, but he has an injury, and then he decides that he's going to get into the advertising business.
Chris Smith was an entrepreneur, always looking for the next big thing.
Ed and Chris met each other. They were dynamic guys that had a similar philosophy, and they get to be fast friends.
Ed took a liking to Chris in the same way that Joseph had taken a liking to Ed.
Ed saw in Chris the ambition and drive needed to break through the lead-generating business.
Ed's in a position to where he can hire a team. And he goes, what's going to take us to the next level?
That is when he brought in Chris Smith as a consultant for LG Technologies. Ed and Chris made a great team with the different abilities and talents that they both possess.
Chris was really in the creative side of the ads.
Chris, as a copywriter, was in his element. It was like breathing air to him. All these ideas are just going in his head, and out comes this perfect pitch.
Ed was delivering those leads directly to advertisers who could bid for them and pay for them.
A big part of securing new clients is the larger-than-life excitement created by expensive parties, fancy dinners, and exclusive perks.
They would go to Las Vegas, and different companies would meet, mingle, interact.
Ed is a salesman, so what client wouldn't like being taken to nice dinners, nice bottles of wine, trips to Vegas?
He spent a lot of money schmoozing with clients and showing them how much money that he was bringing in.
Ed takes his responsibility to attract new clients to a new excessive level beyond what Joseph was aware of.
He was regularly flying to Vegas, and not just on a commercial flight. He was taking private planes, getting private rooms, the most expensive liquor, the best food.
Ed had a taste for the finer things, and he didn't spare any expense in that regard.
Chris enjoyed the benefits of being Ed's friend. He liked to be part of that environment.
They were able to build out these marketplaces of buyers that we needed. We were on a really nice trajectory.
Everything seems to be going great, but Ed and Chris are keeping a jaw-dropping secret from their boss.
About 3 months after Chris had been working at LG Technologies, he quickly left the business, and a couple months later, Ed Shin followed suit.
Now Joseph Gray is like, what just happened? Why would they leave?
It didn't make any sense. There was something going on.
Ed and Chris realized that they were kind of sick of making money for other people, and if they started their own business, they would be able to apply their ideas and maybe make a fortune.
To make the betrayal even more personal and painful, Joseph learned that Ed and Chris' new business will be in direct competition with his company.
They've started another business that does the exact same thing, just without Joseph being a part of it.
Ed and Chris call their new company the 800 Exchange. The startup employs their tried and tested winning strategy. Chris is in charge of creative, and Ed is the money man.
One of the strategies that Ed Shin used would be to fly them to Vegas, get the high roller tables, to hire girls to stand by their side, to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on expensive food and liquor, be there for several days, and just basically drown them in money to show them the worth of the company and to get their investment.
Their formula was working. They're knocking it out of the park together.
They were making money hand over fist. It was extremely lucrative.
The 800 Exchange is doing so well that Chris convinces his younger brother, Paul Smith, to move from Oregon to California to work at the company.
Paul and Chris they're more than just brothers, they were best friends.
For Paul, this was an opportunity to leave the rain, to come to where it's always sunny, to work with his brother, to have his children be closer to their fun uncle, and to make a ton of money.
Back at LG Technologies, Joseph Gray is worried that Ed and Chris may have also stolen from him.
I literally, like a detective, had my office littered with different evidence that I found, going through thousands and thousands of corporate emails, piecing together what exactly had transpired.
Joseph Gray goes a little bit deeper in his company and has a forensic accountant come in and evaluate the books. And they realize, holy cow, we were ripped off.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been billed to a client, but the money had been diverted. Driving the final nail into the coffin of their friendship, Joseph traces the missing money to its final destination.
Those funds went into Ed Shin's personal bank account. I had been backstabbed by Ed.
The ultimate betrayal from someone that you met in a Christian-based setting, you ask yourself, how can I have faith? How can I trust anyone again?
A forensic accountant has uncovered a startling secret. Ed Shin made changes to LG Technologies' system in order to reroute money to his personal bank account.
We realized after looking a little bit closer that there was shy of $1 million in actual cash that was embezzled.
Ed embezzled money from somebody who had really mentored him, both personally and professionally, someone who had put all his trust in him.
It was obvious that there was some wrongdoing.
He betrayed that trust completely.
But beyond that, there were leads that were most likely siphoned off from our TV stations and converted into cash off the radar. I'd say probably another $1 million. When you realize that you were duped, it really sets you back in how you view people in general and your willingness to trust.
Despite the bad blood and potential criminal charges, business at 800 Exchange is booming.
Ed and Chris were a phenomenal team. They were unstoppable.
They're killing it. They made approximately $12 million in their first year of business, and it's almost all profit.
They complemented each other. They just had that drive, the background, the creativity, the business sense at that surface level.
With the growing list of Fortune 500 companies joining their client roster, young entrepreneurs are living the lives they've always dreamed of.
Ed was a wealthy businessman, and he liked people knowing that he was that.
He loved the appearance of being powerful, flashy cars, nice clothing, nice dinners, nice bottles of wine.
Once again, Ed is leading the lavish lifestyle with frequent trips to entertain and impress his clients.
He loved Vegas. He loved the gambling tables.
He would go out and he was spending serious amounts of money.
Unlike Ed, Chris is more careful with his money and isn't going on any crazy spending sprees.
Chris is, in a lot of ways, the opposite. He's the kind of laid-back surfer guy, the guy who's kind of rolling in at 5 o'clock to pull an all-nighter wearing shorts and looking like he came off the beach.
Chris Smith was not alone in his beliefs that corporate life was not necessarily the healthiest way to go, and he couldn't wait to make enough money to go and surf around the world.
He wanted to be free and live a life of relaxation, embracing what this world has to offer.
Chris's charisma and fun-loving personality attracts the attention of lots of beautiful women.
The guy's incredibly good looking. You look at pictures of Chris and it's like, I want to introduce him to my daughters.
One beautiful woman makes a heart-pounding connection with Chris.
Erica was a ballet dancer from Northern California, gorgeous, fiery redhead, very likable, great personality, down to earth. She met Chris at a New Year's Eve party, and they immediately hit it off.
They shared a lot in common. They liked the outdoors. They would go on trips together, the concerts, hikes. She was able to tame Chris. She was exactly what Chris needed.
And Chris's brother, Paul, and his parents absolutely adore Erica.
The Smiths thought that they'd hit a home run because when Chris introduced Erica to his family, they loved Erica.
Chris told his dad, I think this is the one. He had everything planned out to ask her to be his wife.
But not everything is hunky-dory for Chris and Ed. They have a big problem.
My business filed a civil case against Chris Smith and Ed Shin in the neighborhood of $10 million. It was for breach of contract and a number of different things.
Joseph Gray also files a criminal case against Ed Shin to recover the money Ed stole from LG Technologies.
I personally made it a mission. I'm going to hold Ed accountable. I suspected that Chris knew quite a bit, but I don't have any direct evidence. The local police department had enough evidence at that point where they were able to arrest Ed, who made bail, as people often do.
Facing troubling criminal charges, Chris confronts Ed point blank, desperate for the truth.
Chris confides in his brother. Hey, I'm scared, I don't know what's going on, but let's give Ed an opportunity to clear things up. And Ed's reply is, I didn't take anything. This is crazy. I'll take care of it.
And this is somebody that Chris trusted implicitly.
Chris needed to believe in that relationship because Chris was tied to their new business.
Life and business go on, but the looming charges seem to affect Chris and Ed differently.
Even after the embezzlement charge, Ed's lifestyle did not change. He did not appear to be affected by this significant impact on his business and his professional image.
He's still going to Vegas, entertaining clients, still trying to generate revenue, but you have something holding over them, and it's eating away Chris. Chris was very concerned about these lawsuits. Even though he wasn't charged criminally, this is Chris's moral compass that's now being in question.
As his new company comes under the microscope, Chris's laid-back attitude is replaced with growing paranoia about Big Brother.
He had these borderline conspiracy theories. You don't want the government to always locate you. There's too much data out there.
With fears of conspiracy, Chris does what he can to protect his assets.
Chris expressed distrust in the banking system.
He had even gone so far as to stockpile tens of thousands of dollars worth of gold around his apartment. His girlfriend talks about how the stress seemed to be getting to him. She's a little worried about him.
Deception, betrayal, and a thirst for vengeance are causing turmoil in the lives of the tech entrepreneurs Chris Smith and Ed Shin. And pressures are building on all fronts.
Chris's headspace was clouded, and a lot of heavy things started coming down.
Shockingly, the happy-go-lucky, previously peaceful man has a deadly plan to bury his troubles.
He tells Erica, I want to kill Joseph Gray and torture his family.
Chris Smith is a man driven to the brink of desperation and despair.
Chris had told Erica that he wanted to torture Joseph Gray and his family for what they had done in terms of bringing this lawsuit forward and putting him under this stress.
You have to be in a pretty dark place.
This was very unusual behavior for Chris, and people around him were concerned about it.
Joseph Gray is in a legal fight with his former employees, and now he fears for his life.
I hired a security person who would be at the office that knew what Ed looked like in case Ed were to show up. I had somebody posted at my home, and people thought I was probably nuts. Joe's totally overreacting. In my worst nightmare, Ed shows up with a gun.
And the pending lawsuits continue to build anxiety and uncertainty at 800 Exchange.
For Chris, this was really stressful. It made him question if he should continue being in this type of a business.
He talked about being a rat in the corporate world.
Chris has an idea to regain his sanity and peace of mind.
Chris expressed to his family that he was interested in leaving the business world and getting off the grid and starting his next chapter, like being a bartender on a beach somewhere and surfing for the rest of his days.
Every surfer in California and probably everywhere else in the world dreams of sailing off into the sunset with a beautiful woman under one arm and a surfboard under the other.
With faraway beaches filling Chris's thoughts, very real legal issues hit Ed at home.
Ed Shin is found guilty of embezzlement.
He was sentenced to state prison pending successful completion of about $700,000 in restitution.
If Ed paid that restitution, that would be the end of it. He would avoid jail time.
As part of the deal, Ed needs to come clean and tell the truth to the courts, to Joseph, and to his business partner, Chris.
What Ed did was calculated. I can get this company off the ground by stealing over here, and then if they do catch me, then I only have to pay back a small portion. You're looking at maybe something north of $2 million in total that Ed managed to embezzle. And we agreed that we would also settle the civil case.
The dismissal of the civil case against Chris meant he was no longer involved in the legal battle with LG.
The settlement brings Ed a step closer to ending his legal troubles. But how can Chris trust his business partner after all these blatant criminal secrets and lies?
He basically says, yeah, I was skimming off the top, but, I deserved it. I wasn't being given what I should have been given by Joseph Gray.
The cat was out of the bag, and Chris became angry.
That's the point when Chris realized Ed was not exactly who he had shown himself to be, that he would not be a good person to remain in business with.
Chris realizes he's my partner, and he's the person who I have to ultimately trust. This is a guy who stole from somebody who was kind of bringing him up last time. Is he going to do it to me?
He learns that his partner is shady, that he has a whole other side of his personality, and this is beginning to go from dream to nightmare from the perspective of Chris Smith.
With the disappointing and shocking secrets now revealed, Chris worries about his own finances.
Ed is now a convicted embezzler. Chris realizes that he's in business with a guy who's a felon fraudster. And that is a big problem when the felon fraudster is also the one that's in charge of all the business accounts.
Chris suspected that Ed might try to use money from 800 Exchange to pay his restitution.
Chris confides in his brother. I'm not going to let him get away with this. He's not going to take advantage of me.
It got to the point where Chris started pushing Ed, open up the books, show me the books. And Ed didn't want to do it. Ed pushed back. So Chris ended up bringing his own lawyer into the mix. And there's even more tension between these two guys.
Chris is determined to see the books to protect his interests, and he has a card up his sleeve.
Because 800 Exchange was tied into it, for this agreement to fully come to fruition, Chris was going to need to sign off.
If those signatures weren't on that document by a certain date, Ed was going to jail.
Ed needs Chris's signature, so Chris demands some changes.
Chris has put in certain things in the business that would give him a little bit more control.
There's going to be some restrictions so that Ed doesn't have complete control of finances.
And Ed reluctantly agrees to meet his friend and business partner.
Ed has agreed to give Chris access to the books and make sure that there has to be 2 signatures on every check.
So they schedule a meeting.
Ed and Chris were set to meet at the business, and Ed would show the books to Chris.
The stage is set to expose new secrets, lies, and deceptions that will change the lives of these partners forever.
If Ed had been stealing from his own company and from Chris, then that would have been a major problem.
On June the 4th, 2010, the two friends meet at their company office to go over the financial records.
Chris has every intention of remaining in the company despite his growing concerns about Ed.
Chris wanted to make sure that the restitution money was coming out of Ed's own pocket.
Chris was doing what he could now to put those checks and balances in.
Suddenly, the meeting takes a turn. Chris has a life-changing epiphany.
I want to get away from this and drop out of the rat race permanently.
Chris decides he wants to sell his shares in the business and leave the corporate rat race behind.
Ed agreed and said that he would give Chris $1 million, and Chris could leave the country and move on to his next chapter.
He always talked about how wouldn't it be great to make a bunch of money, retire early.
So Chris reaches out to his lawyer with the news.
Hi, I agreed in principle with Ed to buy me out.
Chris's attorney gets an email saying, okay, forget everything we've worked on for the last several months. I've changed my mind.
Chris's attorney is really surprised at this. They had not discussed him just up and leaving the company.
That was his fantasy, that was his dream, to go and surf the world, get off the grid, get off the hassle.
Next, Chris shares his new plans with the family.
I'm going on a vacation, probably a 3-week trip to Galapagos Islands and Costa Rica. Need to just get out of the matrix and find myself.
I had been bought out by Ed, so I have the money. I'm gonna go live life.
I'm gonna go surf the Galapagos and then go through South America, and I'm gonna take this wonderful round-the-world surf trip that every surfer dreams of.
Give me this time. I'm just taking a short 3-week vacation. And after that, I'll regroup and we'll meet up.
The impromptu adventure isn't out of character or unprecedented for Chris.
Chris was the type that sometimes would just escape.
He would go to Indonesia every year or so and do a boat trip there.
He took his brother Paul on a 3-week trip to Tahiti.
And that was typical of Chris.
As Chris sails away from his problems, Ed gets a handle on his new responsibilities.
With Chris gone, Ed was feeling tremendous pressure because not only did he have to pay the restitution for the embezzlement, but now he had to find a way to rebuild their business.
There's a bunch of emotions going on within the entire 800 Exchange company.
Paul's frustrated as well. His brother, who brought him into this company, has basically kind of bailed and taken off without any warning.
Problems are not the only thing Chris leaves behind. His girlfriend is stunned by a blunt goodbye message.
Erica also received an email in which Chris broke up with her.
She gets dumped basically through an email. He said, I don't want to get married. I did meet someone else and we're on a trip together. You can imagine how devastated Erica was.
She thought that she'd been bailed on, abandoned by this guy who promised to marry her.
This had to be absolutely devastating to her.
Now he's telling Paul, you never guess who I'm with. I'm with Tiffany Taylor. She's a Playboy playmate. She's beautiful.
Paul receives a photo of his brother's great new life featuring a seductive brunette.
He's with a beautiful Playboy playmate. He's on a yacht. It couldn't get any better.
Literally is living the dream.
Heartbroken and betrayed, Erica wants to talk to Chris, but he's not interested.
He says, I'm not taking my cell phone. I don't want people bothering me.
He's getting on sailboats and he's not going to have any internet access. So I will try to reach you when I get to an internet cafe.
She's left with a lot of questions. Chris just took off.
Chris is away travelling the world, and Ed and Paul struggle to keep the 800 Exchange successful. It's not so easy without Chris and his brilliant copywriting.
Ed was faced with being made to stay back and save the business while Chris was able to freely travel the world.
The creator, the artist, is never coming back. He's bought out.
The business is in limbo.
This would not have happened if Chris didn't leave.
But dropping revenue doesn't change Ed's legal financial obligations to Joseph Gray. It just makes payments harder.
Ed was continuing to travel to Las Vegas regularly in order to wine and dine clients and try to bring in more money.
He has to convince everybody that, don't worry, I have it under control.
Then Chris's family receives another surprising message. He decided to extend his 3-week excursion.
He needs a little bit more time, so he goes, I'm going to extend this for 2 more months. I want to be alone. I don't want anyone to find me.
Who could have ever fathomed what that would turn into one day?
It's a troubling time for the loved ones of Chris Smith as he extends his vacation, leaving his family wondering what is going on.
He had told his family that he would leave and abandon that high-speed, high-drive lifestyle.
They were surprised that he would do it the way he did.
Amazing sailing for the past 2 weeks. We are on a 45-foot sailing yacht, so there's no internet or phones, just us and the sea.
They were dependent on him finding the next internet cafe to send an email from wherever he was, but never really sure of his exact location and did not have a way to get a hold of him if they needed to.
The lack of communication sets a stage of desperate uncertainty that worries his parents.
Chris's dad started to become very suspicious and asked questions that only Chris would know.
Chris, if this is you, what lake did you grow up on?
Dad, I'm fine. Stop tripping. Then I'll tell you about Kelly Lake.
Chris responds with the correct answer.
So, at least temporarily, Chris's dad is satisfied.
Chris continues to update his family from port to port with brief messages of his adventures.
Then they get one saying, hey, I'm in India now. I just met this guy. I'm going to get on his yacht and go to Africa.
He's talking about traveling through Rwanda and trying to sell gold coins.
He's talking about going to the Congo to buy a conflict diamond for Paul.
Now it's starting to get a little dangerous. Is Chris putting himself in a place of danger because he's stressed?
I'm a white kid going to Africa with literally a pocket full of gold to buy conflict diamonds in a war zone. Like that, it is the most dangerous thing that a parent could possibly imagine.
As Chris ventures into treacherous territories, his emails become few and far between.
His family's deeply concerned. Maybe he's injured, maybe he's in a hospital.
The length of this trip keeps on expanding. There's no end in sight.
Four months after Chris Smith's exit, the 800 exchange is struggling to stay profitable. But money attracts money, and Ed Shin knows it.
As he tries to keep this company together, Ed's still holding these Vegas events.
Paul goes to a dinner with some clients, and Ed usually has beautiful women there for entertainment.
And lo and behold, across the room, the person that he thinks is on this round-the-world sailing trip with Chris Smith is literally sitting there at the 800 exchange party.
Holy cow, this is Tiffany Taylor.
Paul recognized her from the one picture his brother had sent him.
He's ecstatic. How is Chris? I know everything about you. And she looks at him like, what are you talking about?
Like, aren't you supposed to be on a boat with my brother? And she's like, I'm so sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Tiffany's reply leaves Paul speechless.
If Tiffany Taylor didn't know Chris, then who was Chris with and what was he doing?
Paul's brain is just about ready to explode.
No one has any clue what's going on at this point.
Paul can't get a hold of Chris until he receives an alarming message.
This last year has been the worst year of my life. I even contemplated suicide.
It becomes increasingly apparent to the family that Chris is disturbed, he's on the edge, and he's making really bad decisions.
Then, over Christmas, 6 months after he left the US, the emails from Chris Smith come to a halt.
The worry starts to increase. Your mind starts to wander.
Your son is either alive or the worst has happened.
Debbie is checking hospitals. Steve is contacting the State Department, the embassies.
Now, grief-stricken and perplexed, Chris's parents need to do something for information, so they file a missing persons report. Detective Julia Bowman is assigned to the case.
From the moment that I opened the case file, there was so much that was wrong with it. There were so many red flags to me.
Nothing is going well for the former business partners. Chris has stopped all communications home, and Ed's business has crashed and burned.
Chris is instrumental for the success of the company. Once he disappears, the company basically goes down the drain.
This was very damaging to Ed's ego. He was accustomed to being on top, being successful, and his credibility was in question, and his business was failing without a successful way out.
This is the biggest example so far of kind of this fall from financial grace.
Disgraced and embarrassed, Ed closes the business and moves out.
In January of 2011, literally overnight, on a weekend, Ed packed everything up and just abandoned the office space.
He leaves without paying $40,000 he owes to the property manager.
It just so happens that Joe Dallow's PR firm has offices in the same building that Ed did.
The landlord was like, can you help me track this guy down because he owes me a bunch of rent?
He said, Laguna Beach was in the complex looking for Shannon too. I said, Laguna Beach, we're in the city of San Juan Capistrano. What's Laguna Beach doing in here? According to Laguna Beach Police Department, Chris's dad filed a missing persons report because they lost communication with him. And we said, oh, that's interesting.
So suddenly you have one business partner who appears to have fallen off the face of the earth, another business partner who appears to be missing, trying to deduct these required payments.
I asked if the property was still open and vacant, and he said yes. So I go, great, can we go in there? And as we're looking around, just nothing really there to see, I go into Chris's room. And on the light switch looked like a small pea-sized blood stain.
With the discovery of blood at the 800 Exchange offices, authorities are notified about a potential crime.
At this point, it was becoming pretty clear that this was not going to have a happy ending.
The discovery of blood at the 800 Exchange offices leads Detective Julia Bowman to get a search warrant.
When we walked into the business, it was pristine condition. Nothing was out of place. Nothing really stood out. We directed the crime lab technicians to Chris's office, and they sprayed luminol.
And it lit up like a Christmas tree.
There was blood spatter on the ceiling, on the walls, on the ground.
And it's looking like foul play is absolutely involved.
Then they pull up the carpet and there are huge stains of blood.
Blood samples are sent to the lab and the results stun everyone.
When DNA is done, they're able to make a link between the blood that's recovered at 1-800-EXCHANGE under the carpet and the family of Chris Smith.
Chris Smith wasn't taking time off. He was dead.
All he wanted to do was enjoy his life, spend time with the people he loves, and now he can't do any of those things.
And the lingering question is, if Chris died months ago, who's been sending all these emails?
The investigation has taken a deadly turn, and a digital forensic analysis of Chris's communications reveals a depraved secret hidden for over a year.
What is being portrayed as being sent from all over the world was coming from Ed's computer, from his own office.
It's a startling secret. Ed Shin fabricated the twisted story and impersonated Chris to deceive everyone.
These guys hung out together for years. He has enough information to sell it.
Chris never left the U.S. Chris never wrote to his parents, never sent a message to Erica.
Every email he sent was a lie to the family of a dead man. And to do that dozens of times over months and months and months, I mean, that's dark.
Ed had motivations and secrets he felt were worth killing his friend for, but police need to prove that the church-going businessman is a calculating, cold-blooded murderer.
There's the Ed Shin that everybody knows, and then there's the real Ed Shin.
Ed was able to present himself as a church-going family man, but Ed lived a life of a lie.
Deception certainly seems to come easily to Ed Shin.
As detectives dig into Ed's past, ugly truths and hidden secrets start scratching into the light of day.
When Ed was in his early 20s, he was living with his parents in their mansion. One day, Ed's parents received an email that their son had been kidnapped, and if they ever wanted to see him alive again, they needed to pay the kidnappers $1 million.
the FBI got involved, and they realized that the email had been sent within the Shin's home.
Ed was extorting his own father for money.
With substantial evidence stacked against him, criminal investigators exposed the brutal truth hidden behind Ed's secrets and deceptions. Reconstructing Chris's last known whereabouts uncovers a backstabbing, ruthless killer. Here's the truth of what really happened.
It was the evening of Friday the 4th of June 2010.
Ed and Chris meet at 800 Exchange.
Everyone else is left for the day.
Chris asked Ed to see the books for their business, and Ed refused.
Ed can't let Chris see the books because there's no money left. Ed has already stolen from him, and he's ripped him off to probably every dollar that they've made.
Chris is going to stop him from controlling the money, which is going to prevent Ed from stealing from their own company so he could pay his debt.
As soon as Chris actually sees the books, he's going to file a lawsuit.
Faced with his secrets and lies being exposed, Ed makes the brutal decision to murder his friend and business partner to keep his deceitful actions hidden.
And he attacked him from behind with a baseball bat.
Ed just violently, relentlessly bludgeoned Chris to death.
Ed Shin has done the unthinkable. And now he needs to cover his tracks.
I've got to clean it up before anybody comes in. He sends an email out to everybody saying, hey, don't come in on Monday.
Ed had directed a cleaning crew to literally repaint everything and clean all the carpets.
He needs to come up with a story to explain what happened to Chris, so Ed spins a huge lie and secretly takes over Chris's online identity.
The audacity to pretend to be Chris to the people he loved and to write letters and give them a sense of hope that Chris was alive but traveling around the world, and then putting dark messages into those emails about Chris contemplating suicide and sending that to his parents.
If it's going to save him, he doesn't care who he walks over or who he hurts. He's diabolical. He's a sociopath. He's a psychopath.
Hoping to find Chris's body and closure for the Smith family, authorities dig deep.
The night after Chris Smith went missing, Ed Shin's phone pinged out the middle of nowhere in the Mojave Desert in between Mexico and the United States, where he remains for about the time it would take to bury a body before driving back into Orange County. There were multiple searches, but it's really difficult to find a human body in a shallow grave in the desert.
Chris's body was never found.
The location of Chris's remains is a cruel secret Ed refuses to unravel.
Ed was arrested as he was trying to get on a flight to Canada.
There's disbelief, of course, but there's also this feeling of vindication. I had the premonition that Ed was capable of murder. He had the ability to play a role and to come across as somebody who's God-fearing.
Ultimately, Ed was brought to justice for the murder of Chris Smith. It was the fastest jury deliberation in Orange County history for the guilty verdict of life without the possibility of parole.
It is literally a wolf in sheep's clothing scenario.
He's now in a place where he can no longer continue this pattern of lies and secrets that can harm anyone else.
Even after his death, Chris Smith leaves a lasting impression in the lives of many.
I connected to Chris because he lived in my neighborhood. We'd surfed all the same spots. He's like a lot of friends that I have.
I was blessed with being able to take Chris's surfboard back to the family. And when I was asked to do that, that was an honor for me. I got to know Chris through the eyes of his family. When I visit the Smiths, I feel Chris's presence.
There's nothing that can be done to repair the damage that was done.
Chris Smith lost his life. It's a terrible outcome. And for what?